I am. Okay,
Go ahead,
everybody ready?
Micah. Yes, let's do this.
It is Friday, August 24th, 2018. I'm Micah Sargent, and right now we're going to talk about a big old anniversary for good old Tim_Cook, privacy best practices, and Onovo, potentially, which is kind of a scary thing being banned from the App Store, and so much more. I'm going to get right to it because this is the iMore show. And joining us this week is she was once a blur and now she's a noisemaker. It's Georgia_Dow. Hello, Georgia.
It's me and Tim. Tim
You and
and
Tim.
I. We both rock the underscore, so there.
And you're
Yeah,
rocking a
so
cool shirt.
oh yes, let me just tilt the camera down a
Wait,
little
I don't have
bit.
one of those.
I can't
So
squeeze
jealous.
both in. I have the new Vector shirts. Yay!
Cool.
I love it. I love it.
It looks like a
Like,
superhero.
I really love it. My son and I were fighting over the shirt. Because there was only one, and so we were battling it out, and I won.
And credit
Well,
where it's due, that particular treatment was derived from Micah Sargent's awesome lower thirds.
Aw.
It's really nice. It's gorgeous.
The person who was just being sweet, that was the one and only Renee Ritchie. Welcome back, Renee.
I'm eating peanuts, so I'm both sweet and savory.
Nice. I dig it.
I'm like
You're
that
so
naturally
salty today, Renee.
Thank you.
So salty.
I'm gonna be salty. I think I feel a salt coming on.
And both the sweetest and the savoriest person I know, it is Lori Gill. Hello, Lori.
Hello. Yeah, I just want to point out real quick. This morning I was including Tim Cook in a tweet and realized, I don't know why I never noticed it before, but I noticed for the first time that yes, Tim Cook does rock the underscore. So all of the jokes we've been making for the last 5 years about George's Twitter, we can't anymore because she's in good company.
Can we just make the same jokes
Yeah.
about Tim Cook?
Yeah,
You have
actually.
been.
Let's do that.
You were wondering why he was never on the podcast. Now you know.
Oh,
His
that's
feelings are
probably-
hurt.
Well,
Mhm.
speaking of Tim Cook, he just celebrated, or the 7 years of working at Apple has just come up for him.
Happy
And
anniversary.
the Appleversary, that's great, Renee. Now, I have a question. We do have this article that you wrote up on iMore, and there's a cool drawing of Tim
Yes.
Cook on there. Was that your doing?
Yes, I drew that for my original iPad Pro review. I drew a picture of Tim Cook announcing the iPad Pro.
Sweet. That's
It's
very cool.
really good.
It just felt so
Oh, that
meta.
is nice.
Yeah, it makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about Tim Cook sort of taking the reins and where Apple has gotten to now that he's been in power, I guess we could say, for quite some time. Renee, what are your sort of summarized thoughts about the change of power and how things have gone since then?
Well, I think two things. One is that Tim Cook didn't replace Steve Jobs when Steve Jobs passed away. Steve Jobs retired from being CEO and was going to become executive chairman, so some kind of chairman of the board of Apple in an executive capacity, and let Tim Cook take over the day-to-day operations that Jobs had been doing so well until then. So that was already on track. Tim Cook was the CEO when Steve Jobs passed away. And I think after that, there was a significant change in Apple. Steve Jobs always did a lot of things secretly. He just loved his secrets. Like, he did a lot of charity work, but he never let Apple talk about it because he believed it was pimping his own karma and that it was bad. The same way you just don't show the Apple logo over and over again. You don't talk about those kinds of things. It's unseemly. But Tim Cook believes that you don't just do good. You have to inspire others to do good. It's almost like a Batman versus Superman philosophy where, Batman is going to force you to be saved while Superman wants to inspire you to save yourself. And he's taken that and done things like very public charity work with Apple, both matching contributions from employees, but also, helping promote relief efforts. And he's done enormous civil things like promoting equal rights, promoting equal opportunity, promoting privacy as a human right. He very famously came out in an open letter and has worked a lot with the community to just show that diversity isn't a limitation. Diversity is a strength. And when he draws that from Robert Kennedy and from Martin Luther King, he's very much of that generation. And he literally believes that he is everyone's job to put down another stone in paving that golden path forward. And I think as much as he's an operational genius, the famous story is that only Steve Jobs could dream of an iPad, but only Tim Cook could figure out how to sell it for $500. As much as he's that operational genius, he's also become the moral center of Apple.
Oh, I think that's really well put. I genuinely am so jazzed that he has, has taken over, but more importantly, like that he is so public about these conversations, and that I really do feel like he leads Apple in a way that is not afraid to stand up for what's right. And it was, I can't remember, it's been a while now, but that letter where he publicly and widely came out, it was like, it came at a very good time for me when that was something that I needed to read. And it was important, and I'm thankful that he did. And in fact, I told him that, and got a response, an email from him a long time ago, and that was such a cool moment. It's just like, oh my goodness, this guy that I respect so much, who, again, like, he's just so huggable. I just wish I could hug him. He's so sweet every time he takes the stage. Yeah, I'm proud to write a lot, talk a lot, and buy a lot of the products that come from this company, because I think that it's doing great things and continues to do great things, and now is really more than ever, I think, at least publicly, putting it out there and saying, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what we think is important, and we aren't afraid to talk about it, because I don't know that what's become now, I think, an annual Pride band, that portions of the proceeds go to charities, LGBTQ plus advocacy groups. I don't think that would be something necessarily that would have come forth under Steve Jobs. And so Tim Cook's methodology and sort of his beliefs about leading the company and what it can do are incredible.
I might make a few people offended, but I think that the wonderful thing is that, Steve Jobs definitely was a huge visionary. I don't think that Tim Cook has the same level of visionary status that Steve did, but he gains upon his levels of empathy, and that he does really think about society as a whole and Apple's impact on making their own step forward in social stances, where I don't believe that Steve had the same level of empathy of which Tim does. And he's made, I think, a really great impact of change on the world. And he's made stances against, dealing for privacy and really social needs that could cost Apple money in the long run. And he didn't mind doing it because he thought that there was a greater good for that. And so I think that where Apple is now, it's a wonderful thing that Tim has taken the reins to that, because Steve Jobs, again, was great at producing technology, not as great with people. And I think that Tim really is much stronger with his social skills and care.
Right, and he has a team of people under him that can do all of the innovating, and in the meantime, he can be sort of the voice of Apple, and that voice is actually, it's the most important voice, which is to kind of present this sort of unified front of having diversity and inclusiveness. And, you can always find great innovators, but you can't always find people with the right level of understanding and empathy for the differences of everybody around the world. And it's really great that he's the forefront of that.
Steve picked someone good to kind of take over for him, right?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's huge now because we're moving into the era of AI, and AI can be wonderful and it can be terrible. And he's laid out a really clear stance that Apple needs to be ethical AI, and that every machine learning has to be coupled with human editorial, so that you get hopefully the best of both and not the worst of one. And I think that's, like he said this once, it was my favorite Tim Cook. Angry Tim Cook is, you barely ever see him in public, but someone said, why are, a hedge fund said, why are you wasting our money on environment and on accessibility? And he said, when it came to those things, he didn't give a damn about the ROI. And I love that, because maybe Apple is not going to be as far forward as Google or Facebook in terms of the data that they can mine and the predictions that they can make. But Apple is going to do it in a way that protects our privacy and frankly protects humanity from unbridled technology. And I think there's value in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you talk about the levels of empathy versus narcissism and sociopathy versus, you know, thoughtfulness in with people. And I think that, you know, again, Steve chose someone that really could bring Apple into an era when people are now caring and understanding more about how this affects us as a society. And Tim really does think about that. And I think that that's a lovely thing for a huge company to be making sure that people don't come last. Maybe not people first, but you know, they're up there.
I
You know, it's still a huge company, and I'm sure they still have to make money. So
yeah, but not people last.
yeah, I can't say people first, but
well, and so I think another thing, and we've sort of talked about this in our different conversations here, but I don't know how I don't know where we would be right now in terms of the discussion surrounding privacy and personal data security and personal data protection if we didn't have Apple and the FBI sort of going at it, and then now Apple very clearly and very incessantly, I think, constantly putting out that, hey, we care about privacy. Here are the ways that we care about privacy. Oh, in case you thought we weren't going to mention privacy, we're going to mention privacy. And I think that that is awesome in and of itself, but also because it does sort of open up that conversation and make more people think about it. So where consumers may not have necessarily had that near the forefront of their minds, it's more likely to be there because when you open up your iPhone and you go to certain apps, one of those interstitial screens is about privacy and talks about sort of how Apple uses your data. And I think other companies are becoming more likely to want to follow suit or do their best to sort of be upfront about that because customers are or consumers are starting to ask questions and try to figure out where they stand and how their data is being used now that everyone's sort of being more upfront and honest. I don't know, upfront about those things.
They're being forced to be honest because of the GDPR.
Yeah.
it's probably a more accurate statement. Yeah. Forced honesty.
Yeah. I don't want to segue out of talking about the wonders of Tim Cook too soon, but what you're talking about, Micah, is actually a great segue into the next topic, which is about privacy. Renee wrote a really comprehensive guide to protecting your data by checking your privacy settings, not using apps that do certain things, only using certain settings when you need to use an app, things like that. It's actually really great. I just last week had a conversation with a friend that she doesn't have a Gmail account because of Google. And she was just on this rant about all these different organizations that they're so convenient, but they're using all of your data and gleaning all this information from you. And she's just basically afraid to use technology at all. She's like kind of shutting herself off from it. And though her level of fear is definitely higher than mine, I completely understand what she's going through and how she's feeling. We kind of had this wild west of convenience for a really long time where on the consumer side of things, we're like, this is so great. We've got all this great stuff for free. And sure, maybe they're going to be using, tracking some of our data or something like that. But who cares? Because I'm getting all this great convenience. And we're starting to kind of learn more and more about what that means when we're sharing our data with these companies. And we're starting to decide we don't actually want that level of convenience. So it's really important to kind of talk about this now, especially when it is becoming so much. There's a lot more people who are concerned about their data being tracked or collected or traded for goods and services to other companies, or even if it's just sitting in a box somewhere, but that company may get sold to somebody else in the future, or maybe they'll change their policy in the future and they have that data. And even though they say right now that they're not going to do anything with it, they might in the future. And this is all really important stuff for us to be talking about right now, especially as Renee's saying, as AI gets more and more powerful and useful and takes over more of our daily lives? These are questions that we need to consider and talk about more.
One of the most bizarre things I've witnessed recently was on Twitter. One of the heads of Google AI was saying just how dangerous Facebook AI was, because Facebook was already been caught running psychological experiments. And because of the choices of what they show you in newsfeed, they can moderate your mood. They can make you sad or they can make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
And with you start putting AI into that, they can start to modify your behavior. Oh, you don't like the Star Wars prequels? Well, all your friends like the Star Wars prequels. Look at all the great stuff about, oh, wow, you're real. And like really, like there's forces that they can exert to modify behavior. And he thought how calamitous that would be. And then someone said, dude, you work for Google. And he's like, we're not the same at all. We don't do that stuff. And then the person linked to YouTube showing you more and more extremist videos to try to keep your attention on the platform. He's like, yeah, well, that's just YouTube. You know, it's one of those things. And but like, almost nobody understands that they play a part in this unless you actively understand that you play a part in this. And I think unless you take that responsibility, it's going to end badly for you in like a Cambridge Analytica or a location subpoena, you know, one of those things. And I think we're going to need these companies to sort of step up and do the classic Jurassic Park thing. Can't believe I'm quoting you in Malcolm, but to stop thinking about what they can do and start thinking about what they should do.
But I don't think that that's in their nature, right? People are in companies, as companies are people, really they will do what is in their best interest unless someone puts down some sort of boundaries and consequences to those behaviors so that they must listen. And so you can't really, it sounds great. Like I would love to have more forward-thinking companies that actually care about what footprint they leave upon this planet, but they won't. We do need to have, and again, everyone hates the word regulations, but we do. We have to have laws and regulations in order to police these companies, because if not, the companies become more powerful than the governments that deal with that, and really bad things can happen. And it's only, unfortunately, human nature is that we don't want to change anything because change is scary. And we always think about the slippery slope, which I fully do understand. But without laws and regulations to be able to deal with that, hopefully by people that understand the technology that they are going to be writing laws about, which is another huge issue, chaos is going to happen. Like it's just what happens to that. But only once it hits do people then go, oh, you were right. Yeah, I actually should have thought about that. I was just so busy inside of my bubble. Why even bother? Only when it comes into your lawn are you like, oh,
yeah.
wait, get off of my
mentioned
lawn.
Lenovo, I think, in the teaser already, and that was another example. Facebook bought this VPN app and gave it to everybody for free. And at the bottom, in the terms and conditions, which no human reads, you know, yeah, sure, that's our responsibility to read them, but we're just inundated with these things all day. It said that we're going to monitor your activity, see what other apps and things you're using, and how long. I'm going to use that to learn about you and make competitive products and try to put those companies out of business, basically.
I love though the way that they always, even when they do, and I actually read not all terms and service, but a lot of them, they put it like, so we can best target ads to things you like almost like this is to benefit you.
To create a better experience, I think is how they.
That's usually it. Yep.
And so what happened with that, Micah? Because
so this was, you know, a company that existed on its own, and then Facebook purchased the company. And yeah, basically at the end of the terms and conditions, it was like, we send all this data over to Facebook and Facebook uses that to make its products better. Because I do think there's one important thing to note, and that is that Facebook, the way that Facebook makes money is by not selling user data, but by selling ad targeting. And so companies say, we want to get in touch with the people who are using these apps and we want to show them these ads. And so because Facebook got, you know, the data from Onovo, they were able to then target those specific people using those specific apps. Well, in Apple's updated guidelines, that's the word that they use. In Apple's updated guidelines, they are specifically like explicit about the fact that you cannot have apps that track other apps, or the use of other apps. And on top of that, there are guidelines about how and how clear you sort of have to make it whenever you are taking user data and sending it to different places. So Apple says, if you're trying to see what other apps a person is using for the purpose of analytics or marketing, don't do that. That's a no-no. And then the other thing, like I said, was just they have to be clear about how data is being tracked and used. So Apple said, you got to get that app out of the App Store. Goodbye. And the app has been pulled from the App Store.
Some people were wondering why Apple didn't just pull it, but it's important to remember that these are, like, with individual apps, it's not a big problem. But when you have companies the size of Google and Facebook and even Uber and Path that are platform defining, that are almost like, you're not talking to kids at that point. And I don't want to term developers as kids, but you're talking to other massive companies that will bring massive regulation and potential mutually assured destruction on you. These sorts of things are better handled by calling their CEO in and having a heart-to-heart than just arbitrarily axing them.
Because then they would end up with a whole bunch of press of, Apple censoring apps. Yeah. And people would be angry before they realized that the reason for it is because they were breaking the terms and conditions of how to keep your information safe.
If you have, these bigger corporations sort of lobbying to change the laws to protect what they want to do, you might even be able to, put in some sort of, across the board regulations that wouldn't let Apple ban you, for example. I'm not even sure if that's even possible with a private company, but, if you have a lot of money in your pockets, you can make a lot of changes. So that's another danger to that kind of situation. Micah,
I was going to say, the be all end all would be something like how Amazon and, oh goodness, there are a few different services who have put pressure enough on Apple through the way that they do things to make some changes. And so one example of that is if you want to buy an Audible audiobook, you have to go to Safari, mobile Safari, in order to purchase the audiobook, because they don't want you to do it within, Amazon doesn't want you to do it within the app, because if you do it within the app, then Apple gets a cut of that and they don't want to give up a portion of the proceeds. So you have to sort of bump out to do that, which makes the experience not as great. And, it's sort of like these back and forths that can take place. So definitely it makes sense when you've got big companies backing it. You can't just necessarily just whoop, unless it was like, I'm sure if it was super, super, super bad, it would be something that Apple would just pull, but it worked that they were like, hey, can't have this here. Okay, well, we'll get rid of it. I do want to talk to you all about our friends at Thrifter. So I'll let Lori head over to Thrifter while I tell you about how it's a way to save money on everything. You can save money on gadgets. You can save money on home goods. You can learn about upcoming products that aren't out yet, so you can sort of get in line for pre-orders and things like that. It's all based on value and not hype. So you're getting the real deals, not just those sort of fake discounts that get you. If you sign up at thrifter.com, you're going to get thoughtfully selected deals from places like Amazon and Best Buy and several other places too. It's all the stuff and none of the fluff at Thrifter. And Lori, why don't you tell us about a recent deal over on the site?
I can never find like the perfect one because there's so many that are either just funny to me or they're just such great deals. Let me just mention one really quick. There's this thing called Taco, and it's a nail polish bottle holder that looks like a ring, and you set it on your finger and then you put your fingernail polish in it. I just wanted to mention that because that was just really funny to me. But a really great deal that just popped up today is
sorry, I just saw the taco.
I think I would like move my hand and pour out nail polish all over myself.
Like pick
I'd
up
like
your
sneeze
phone
or
on
something.
accident, and it's like, oh no,
Taco did it.
I just thought that was too funny to pass up. But there is this really, really good deal on two Mophie wireless charging pads, that's my favorite one. The Mophie charging pad is my favorite one. You can get a 2-pack. That's 2 of them for only $61.74, which is a really
bonkers.
Good deal on those. Yeah.
That's wow. Everyone needs to go get that deal. Seriously.
Yeah. If you have a wireless phone, a phone that supports the Qi contactless, wireless, whatever you want to call it. Inductive. Yes. Thank you. Inductive charging. The Mophie wireless charging pad is my personal favorite, and it's on sale for a really, really good discount.
personal favorite of a lot of folks, I think.
Yeah. I might buy another one, honestly, and just keep
Yeah,
it
I'm
all
looking
around
at
so
it
I can
now.
dump my
I
phone
wanna-
down.
Yeah, you can get 2 of them. You could put one in your bedroom, one in your living room.
Well, I
One
just
where
walk
you
in
just
and
One
I
in the
walk my
bathroom,
phone down.
house, your
One in the
kitchen,
bathroom, underneath the
garage.
sink.
I walk in and I dump my phone down, and I might as well charge when I drop it. You know, that's my thing.
I like that.
Yeah,
If you're not
just
working for
completely
me,
cover
you better
your
be
floor.
charging for me.
I
Yes.
am looking for it now.
Got
Where
one in
is
my
it?
doghouse, one in
There we
the
go.
attic.
Wow,
One in your doghouse, in-house, hen house, and outhouse.
that's a good price.
5 mile
Yes,
radius.
all of those.
I like how we're doing an ad for Thrifter right now, and we're all just shopping. I'm gonna buy this.
Thrifter.
Well, I like the
Thrifter
fact that they go through and find the good sales, so I don't have to. It just saves me time.
Yeah, exactly.
It
Yeah.
almost sounded like you just read copy of that, but you really didn't.
Shadow. No,
Really?
I really didn't. Shadow of War is also going for $10. It is one of my favorite games. My son has started playing it just now.
Do you slay things in it?
Like your son is literally playing it. while
I
you're doing
don't
this
slay
podcast?
them. I free them, the orcs, from their suffering.
From the
That's
mortal
right.
coil.
I forgot. It's been a while since we talked about you freeing orcs from their suffering.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
true.
bringing them to the light.
So you could head to thrifter.com to get deals, or you could head over to @thrifterdaily on Twitter and give that a follow. You can see all those awesome deals and save some orcs from their suffering. All right, let's go ahead and move on to talk about.
Actually, one quick thing, Mike. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I really do want to take a moment. You described the way companies use our data. Can you repeat it a little and talk a little bit more about it? Because it was such a great explanation of when I'm reading the terms and conditions and it says things like, we don't sell your data, we collect your data to provide you with better advertising or better, and I'm just like, okay, whatever. But you actually just said some things that were really helpful for me to understand what it is that companies actually do with your data when you mentioned what Facebook was doing with the Anovo thing.
Yeah, so it does depend on the company and on the service, but Facebook is one, and you're going to see networks that focus on advertising. They're going to be the ones, Twitter would be another example of this, that are specifically, they do not want to sell the data that they have because that would lose them money. They collect data on your behaviors, they collect data on the things that you like on the site, and then because Facebook has like buttons spread across the internet, it's this scary octopus that's just got its tendrils and everything.
The Kraken.
Yes, thank you. A Kraken. I couldn't think of what it was called. And so the Facebook Kraken is collecting all of this stuff and then building a profile on you. And then advertisers come to Facebook and they say, okay, I want to find someone who really likes Chihuahuas and who also likes coffee and is a person of color, and throw in a few other key phrases. Because I'm trying to sell, I don't know what that would be, like a special brand of dog food that donates to certain charities or something. So they're looking for a specific group of people to target. And because Facebook has all that data, then it's become super easy to get to those people and get those ads to them.
So in that particular circumstance, when that ad company goes to Facebook, and we're just using these examples, this is not, the specifics, but so Facebook isn't going to sell your data to them. What are they going to do instead?
You are buying ads and they're saying, okay, we know who you want to target. We'll take care of it and send it out to those people. So Facebook collects it and doesn't, they don't get to see like, oh, well, that's these 50,000 people. It's like, no. It's sort of like what am I trying to say? Like a curtain in between. You pass the money through, and then they, on the other side of the curtain, do all of the spreading it out and distributing it. So Facebook is an ad network that uses the data that they've collected to target specific people across all of Facebook. And keep in mind that Facebook is one of the biggest social network, or it might even be the biggest social network in all of the world. So they've got a lot of people. And therefore, companies do advertise on Facebook because and that's the thing too, is like Google does advertising as well. But when you're a social network and you can collect that much more behavioral information and specific likes and dislikes, you can target people so specifically that companies are going to pay out of the, they're going to pay a lot of money. We'll just say that instead, to get that direct targeting because they're going to see ROI, return on investment. So that's how Facebook works. But again, depending on where you're going and what companies are behind it, some of these ad networks themselves will buy data packages from companies that are into analytics and things like that. It's just that Facebook doesn't work that way because it would end up losing the money if they sold the data that they have.
Right.
They're
And
a treasure trove.
I think that the reason I wanted to have you kind of clarify that with a little more specifics is what we hear all the time from these companies is, we never sell your data. So then we all go, oh, well, you don't sell my data. So, okay, I guess you aren't doing anything with it. You're just keeping it in a little box for yourself. And here's a really great way of... Yeah, here's a really great way of describing to people, like, no, Facebook doesn't sell your data because, like you said, Micah, they would lose money if they didn't get to keep that for themselves. But what they do is they collect money from people and distribute information based on their own understanding of your data. So you know, Kellogg's doesn't get my data, but Kellogg's pays Facebook to advertise to me.
Yeah, because you liked a Kellogg's post one time. Or maybe you like roosters. I don't know. Whatever it is that would make it seem that you would be right to do that. I think there's like that infamous story about I think it might have been proved false, but it is a good example on the face of it. A woman didn't realize that she was pregnant, but she was using like her shopper value card or whatever. Those, by the way, like if you've got any of those, I've got one right here, a little save you money card. Every time you use that, the company gets information on your shopping habits and then uses that to market to you better. So anyway, the purchases that she was making at the store gave the people an idea that she might be pregnant. And so they started sending her ads for like Pampers and things like that. And she's like, why am I getting these ads? And she went to the doctor and she was pregnant. So surprise. But again, I can't remember, that might have ended up being proven false. But the idea is that totally makes sense. If you start to work with AI, then suddenly this system figures out based on your shopping habits or what you're liking online. And it just gets scarier and scarier from there. I mean, we are right on the cusp of that. So I think that's why user privacy is so important, and we have to be good stewards of our data.
Yeah, right, it's absolutely true. I was going on Reddit and I'm surfing around and I'm like, God, there's a lot of like therapy products out there. I truly didn't get it at first. I was like, oh, look at all these people selling therapy. Therapy must be really popular. I'm like, oh, no, that's because I'm online going through all kinds of things for therapy. And so they're targeting me and figure I'm searching for therapy, not giving therapy. And so that's why they're doing that. Or after we looked around on like, you know, bought our house for our mortgage, right now I'm looking at TD Insurance, get a quote, blah, blah, blah. Like this is all because it's targeting the data that I've already given to them willingly because I've used, you know, Google to search for something instead of my usual DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo. And if you want to go through this, Renee has a great video on it. So like for some people, you might not want to read, you might want to consume this through video format. And so Renee's Vector Show has him. I love it. It's like on the side while he's talking about it, it's how to deal with this and turn it off. So it's like, how many minutes, Renee?
I think it's like 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's like really quick. He will go through all the tips to really help you. And I think it's his latest show. And it just has on the sidebar how to do it step by step. So if you're more of a visual learner and you want to have someone run it through with you, he does that while he talks about it.
Excellent.
So watch one show and just be safer.
And then you're like Wonder Woman.
Ding. Your privacy is yours.
Yes, yes. And this is one of the things that really bugs me. I know we continue to talk about this, but my Instagram experience has sort of been ruined because of these ad tracking networks. And that's because Facebook and Instagram have found out that I'm not heterosexual. And so everything, I shouldn't say ruined, but it's certainly colored in a certain way. Like it has been colored in a certain way to where in my discovery tab, it's just constantly like pictures of men, you know, like muscled men. And then like the advertisements are all like, do you have HIV and things like that. And like, that is making these assumptions based, like it's absolutely horrible that these assumptions get made. But they are being made. And that is, I think, the failing of these ad networks,
right.
Where you again, they're being powered by folks and maybe algorithms that aren't, I don't know, aren't thinking wisely. I don't know really what to say.
Yeah, they're throwing all kinds of stereotypes and biases. And so now when you go on Instagram, you are constantly being inundated with stereotypes and biases because of what people are assuming about something, which seems like a very unpleasant experience. This isn't just ads now. Now you're having to go like, why is this constantly inundating me? And how do we kind of go through to stop this?
Yeah, because like I just want to see photos of dogs in my Discover tab, and it's not photos of dogs. And yeah, that bugs me because like I know that I should probably just be able to stand in a line at the store or something, but sometimes it's nice to sort of like, oh, now that I'm not doing anything, I'm going to look through Instagram. But then it just like I'm on some like nudie site or something in the middle of the line.
Does it almost make you feel like an other instead of like, because you've been boxed?
Yeah, it does. It's exactly. It's like how you've put me in this box and like you've not given me a way to get out of the box, and because of this one assumption, like it's colored the whole experience for me based on what you think. Yeah. So anyway, that's my complaint about ad networks and how they can be failings, I think, and how it's sort of difficult to undo those things once they've been done. Twitter is another example where I don't know if at some point I had a Spanish word in a tweet of mine or something, but now I regularly get advertisements in Spanish entirely. And you can go in and say, no, I don't speak any other languages, or I speak these languages. And it still is serving me ads in Spanish. So again, those things really bug me because it's just making assumptions that may not necessarily be true, or again, are just sort of like pigeonholing you when you don't want to be. I don't want to be put in a box. Like you said,
I fully understand that. A lot of the times that we go and we spend on technology, it is to escape from the world. I don't want to be reminded that I do therapy constantly and have it up, because I actually have like whenever I have to do work, I'm like, it's a different feeling I get. And so when I constantly see therapy, I go into my work mode. I can't even watch movies with a lot of therapeutic stuff in it, because I'm like, then I'm thinking they're not doing it right. And but also like it's not even stereotyping. I must have searched for stuff. But then it assumes that then I want to see this. So in that way, that is a stereotype, because I don't. I'm actually like, when I'm off duty, I want to be off duty.
Yeah. Amen. So the problem with the advertising in the way they're doing it now is you kind of get to that point of, am I being advertised to because of what I like, or do I like what I like because of what I've been advertised to? You're in a cycle now that you can't get out of.
Oh no! Now we're going Inception levels, Lori.
Yeah, I just try to put my hands over my ears, but I can't.
But you haven't.
I don't want to hear that. Oh wait, I just made
louder.
My hands inside my phone.
Louder. He amplified it.
I don't want to hear that. You're louder. Oh dear.
Let's turn off this depressing subject and talk about something fun.
Lori is living rent free, right?
Mac Mini Pro, or Mac Pro Mini, or Max Pro Mini, or Mac Pros Mini. What is it, Renee? Mini Pro?
Mac Mini devices.
Oh, good. You've actually figured out the proper language.
Mac Mini devices of the Pro variety. There's a rumor that the Mac Mini is it's gonna be coming back around. Apple's gonna be selling a new one, and that it might be sort of pro focused potentially. This is the upgrade that we've had. This is the first upgrade we've had in, it says, about 4 years.
All the years.
And it certainly feels like all the years, as much as I hear people complain about it. Oh, sorry. So this is the first new update in quite a while, and allegedly it's going to be focused on pro users with like new storage options and processor options. Is that correct?
So I don't know. I tweeted about this months and months ago, but I didn't think that it'd be ready by the end of the year. And I think, our beloved supply chain exfiltrator, Ming-Chi Kuo, wrote about it. I think July, maybe earlier. Yeah, because whenever something starts hitting the assembly line, it's so much money that he gets the information for his clients. But Mark Gurman from Bloomberg was talking about how it's going to be this fall and it's going to be pro-centric. Now, a lot of this stuff, Apple lives in the future. We have to remember that Apple is like a year or 2 years, sometimes 3 years ahead of us in terms of what they're working on. And they sometimes forget what it is that we actually have in the wild. So what we hear are echoes of things that they've already done, decisions they've already made. By the time it hits the rumors, those things have been done and committed. So, and it's also like an elephant. Like some people feel a snake, some people feel a lion, some people feel trees, but it's really part of the whole thing. So it could just be that there will be a new Mac Mini, but it will have options the way the Macs have always had options for more storage, more RAM, more powerful processors. And we have to remember that the Mac Mini there was a server grade Mac Mini before. Apple had 2 hard drives in it instead of the optical drive, and it had a quad core processor, and Apple infamously got rid of it to make it a less capable Mac Mini. So what I'm hoping is that it is a next generation Mac Mini that is largely conformant to the same standards so that people can keep rack mounting them and filling their server farms with them. But it has the latest generation processor options, which will be either Kaby Lake refresh or Coffee Lake, depending on the crap that Intel's got together at the time.
Right.
With the modern updated graphics and with storage. And the thing about Pro is that we've seen with the MacBook Pro that you can go up to 4 terabytes now, but it costs you as much as 2 computers. So you can get a baseline, but the minute you start adding big SSDs and stuff, that is still hella, or big, like 32 gigabytes of RAM. I don't know if it'll go that high. Could tap out at 16 and 2 terabytes like the lower end MacBook Pros, but I still think that's a hell of an interesting computer.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't have much to say about this. I did end up coming to the realization that I could totally see if the Mac Mini offered the same specs that the MacBook Pro has. If you get the same sort of fast processor and storage options,
like a headless iMac.
Yeah, like a headless iMac. If that would be my ideal machine. And the reason why is because I don't like the idea. I like to use 2 monitors. I really like a dual monitor setup, and it's what I have now. I use my MacBook Pro almost exclusively in clamshell mode with the 2 monitors that I have. And I don't like the idea of having an iMac and then a display next to it that does not perfectly match the exact same way and in the same shape. I know that's really picky, but
right.
I don't like that. And so if I could have a Mac Mini that had those same things, that I could then have a desktop machine and a laptop to take with me when I go, that would be so perfect.
So this is the thing. This is exactly the thing. When Apple first made the Mac Mini, it had 2 primary markets overlapping. One was people who'd had a PC and just wanted to try a Mac, and they could literally bring their own keyboard, mouse, and display, plug it in and get going. And the other was, as Apple shipped Xcode and then the iPhone, developers who wanted to get into making apps for them, but wanted to do it as affordably as possible so they could just plug it in next to their PC or their Linux box, whatever they were using, and develop. And those markets aren't quite the same as they used to be. Now people do want to use them in server farms. They do want to use them for home theater. They do want to use them like Micah, so they can have matching displays. And that's a very different market. So I think Mac Mini can grow up a little bit.
Yeah, Mac Mini, you can do it.
We believe.
Any other thoughts on Mac Mini from Lori in Georgia?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I have never owned a Mac Mini, and I've never actually had the desire to own a Mac Mini, though maybe this will be the year that I'll get one and see what I can do with it. Maybe it'll be my fun plaything if the refresh happens. Who knows?
There you go.
That's an important point, though. Sorry, just before we go, that's an important point, is that most people don't own Mac Minis. I think it is, or at least it's fighting Mac Pro for Apple's least well-selling product, because almost every Mac sold is a portable, is a laptop. And then almost every other Mac sold is an iMac. And then you sort of have Mac Mini and Mac Pro duking it out at almost no one ever buys them.
And that's especially for the Mac Mini is like, who wants this? Like, I think if Apple really wants to like turn this into like a good usable thing, they have to figure out who wants it and market it to them, because it is kind of one of those products that's It's not quite niche, but it verges on niche, you know?
It's becoming niche, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Becoming Niche, my new
Becoming
memoir,
niche.
out in January. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to talk about this cool thing that exists over at 512 Pixels. Stephen Hackett of 512 Pixels has put together what he calls the Aqua Screenshots Library. And it's filled with 1,502 images, 1.6 gigabytes of screenshots, all of older versions of Mac OS. That's all the way back to the beginning to what we have now. So you can see how, all the way back to the public beta, you can see what Mac OS first looked like. And of course, over time, what it has become, including a nice stitched version of iCal with that heavy header and the ripped paper at the top of this. I kind of miss that kind of cutesy stuff, but I'm not going to say that too loudly because the internet will kill me.
No, I mean, that's Greg Christie era photorealism. It served its purpose. It was awesome. I still love it. And I'm glad that Apple, like the new iBooks, goes back to that a little bit. So I'm happy.
It definitely set Apple apart from the other operating systems. Nobody else was doing that kind of thing, so that made it special in that regard for sure. Have you guys like actually looked through these screenshots? When I was looking through them, I picked the operating system that I remember being my first operating system, which was Tiger. And I just like went through and looked at all the screenshots and I was like, oh yeah. Remember when like the little pop-ups actually had that sort of faint line that would go through it? You know, that was a real computery looking thing.
Yeah.
Like, those little details would pop up like, oh man, I remember that. It was like really like going back into my memories of the first time I got a Mac and what it felt like to use one, which it sounds so silly, but I felt like I had joined a club, like a special club of people at the time that were Apple people. And it was like a new world had kind of opened up for me. And it's silly to say that because especially I know there's a lot of fear of, or a lot of concern of us being like too Apple fanboy, but honestly, like
Really?
the first time, the first time you got a Mac or even an iPhone, I know everyone listening, I know you felt that way too when you first got that. It's an amazing, thrilling experience to dive into the Apple ecosystem and the software and the design. It's definitely unique and different and exciting. And I think that's why I really liked what Stephen Hackett did. It really gave me a chance to like remember what it was like. Not only the first Mac that I got, but the first time I bought the new software. That was exciting. Oh, I get to upgrade and oh, what a wonderful feeling. The first time Apple announced that the software upgrade was going to be free, that was a really big deal. Like all these memories just started flooding back for me.
Ashboard.
Yep.
Ashboard. I miss
all
the
the good
Ashboard.
stuff.
I mean, it still exists, but yeah, I remember it being a real thing back in the day. So Tiger would have been the first. I remember my uncle had a Mac, and Tiger was what was running on that Mac, and I used to just sort of go and click on things and think that it was so cool in comparison to the PCs that I was using. So,
Georgia,
yeah.
what was your first software?
Oh goodness, I can't even remember. I remember when
right MacBook. So that's probably
yes, you're
Leopard?
right. The
Snow
MacBook
Leopard?
was my first one.
That might have been Tiger
Yeah.
then. It was either Puma or Tiger, probably.
Well,
No,
I don't
the
know. I'm not a
last- the
great
last
upgrader, so
Mac-
I don't really usually look.
You got it right before they replaced it with the aluminum one. So
Yes, it was white. You know, white and open.
Cheetah, maybe.
Or is that Snow Leopard?
I think it was Snow Leopard.
Snow Leopard. No, you're right. Yeah.
But
I think they actually called
it was
that.
a really cool feeling. But I was at first I went through that like anger of having to switch over everything, and I was like upset because I'm like, Renee, I have to have Word. I'm not used to this Pages thing, and I was writing my thesis I think at the time,
Oh
and so I was
my.
grumpy. Yeah, it was actually not. I was a little bit. I was excited and grumpy at the same time, I think. because I was like just doing a thesis.
But you didn't get any viruses after that, which was
I didn't, and everything worked really smoothly, and I didn't lose anything. But I think that the transition over was difficult, and I'm like, I need Word, and so I got Word, and then I was using both, and so for me, I don't know if I'm going to be going back to look at these photos just because some of them were
just going to be bad.
Traumatic.
Fans of the show will remember that instead of just typing plain text into email for her show notes, Georgia would actually do them in Word and send them as an attachment that the rest of us could open.
Like a monster?
I did. I still use Word. Is that horrible?
No, you can use Word, just not for plain text documents.
I use it for now I use notes, but I used to, yeah.
No, Georgia, I used Word until probably 2014. So don't feel bad. Don't.
My classes taught me Word. It was not my fault. I was forced indoctrination.
It's not my fault. I'm not to blame.
Yeah, it's not me.
It's
the system, man.
What about you, Renee? What was your first software?
So, I mean, of the modern, I was using Apple off and on forever, but then because I went to work, it was a Canadian company, and I was doing design, and they wanted me to work with Corel, and Corel was on PC, so I used Corel on PCs for a while. I had a Performa still at home, but I didn't get into OS 10 until I got a Dell Vista laptop that did not come with the drivers for its own screen. So it just didn't work out of the box. And the IT people said, a friend of mine who was working at IT at the company said, look, you're miserable all the time. You shouldn't be working this hard to make your computer help you. The computer should just be working for you. So we're going to order you a Mac. I'm like, really? They're expensive. And he's like, no, this is wasting so much of my time that it's less expensive in the long run. So we got a 17-inch MacBook Pro when those were still a thing.
Wow.
It was running either Tiger, or the first upgrade I got was Tiger. I don't remember exactly, but it was Intel, so it had to have been Tiger. Yeah, so it was the Intel transition. That's why they got it, because we could run all the other software in virtual machine or in boot camp, and that was the trigger that let them bring it all into our company. So it was MacBook Pro running Tiger, and it was glorious. Just Genie effect, Mike. Remember that Genie effect for the dock over and over again?
Yes, just
yep.
Adorable.
Yeah,
it's adorbs.
We are about to run out of time. Do we want to talk about Back to My Mac going away? And this is a good piece that we'll include in the show notes that talks about alternatives to Back to My Mac. So with it gone, what can you do instead? You can check out this article to learn about that. Now, I never really used Back to My Mac. I have not really had any use for it. I think it's because most of the time, the stuff that I needed from my Mac, I had like in Dropbox or some other sort of online cloud service. And I never needed to go as far as to like click onto my desktop and be able to use the machine while I'm away. But I'm curious, what has been your experience with Back to My Mac? Have any of you used it in the past for anything?
I used to use it all the time because
all the time.
Macs. And no, I had multiple Macs. I had one at work, I had one at home, and I could go get files and I could share the screen. And then, like exactly for the reasons you mentioned, Mike, I almost never use it anymore because my documents folder is in Dropbox. A lot of my stuff is in iCloud. And I just use screen sharing outside of Back to My Mac, which Apple hasn't taken away. Basic Mac screen sharing, even aside from, you can get Apple Remote Desktop, but even aside from that, screen sharing still works, which was the only thing I still used. So I know I'm not going to get, like the real Mac nerds will hate me for saying this, and I understand why they miss it. But I think, and Apple hasn't told me anything about this, but my guess is that the usage numbers just dropped and dropped and dropped for the reasons that you mentioned. And it didn't make sense to keep carrying it forward, except for those specific things.
Because it would be too expensive or too difficult or too much upkeep.
It's just like over time, you create new tech. Like they create new features every year, and the people who used to work on the old features have to start working on the new features. And one thing developers love best is deleting old code. If you can delete stuff, and you no longer have to maintain it. If you transition your architecture, if you switch services, you have to go back and rewrite all the old code to work with all the new stuff. And if there's things you can get rid of, that just saves everybody time and effort.
But shouldn't, again, and this is, you can just debate this with me, but shouldn't they make sure that they have a proper way of transitioning people for those that do use something? Because you get used to something, you get used to a system, and then they just get rid of it without a proper substitute to that in place. That's what makes people angry.
This is classic. Yeah. So, I mean, they put out a document and said, this is what you can use and blah, blah, blah. But this is a classic thing about Apple. And it's it used to be one of the biggest differences between Apple and Microsoft is that Microsoft kept everything around. They believed that they had for 20 years, things that 3 people used, they would keep around. And it created a massive technical debt and an incredible drag on them. It's what literally stopped them from innovating for a long time with so much baggage. It's like what Apple has with iTunes right now, frankly. iTunes on the Mac is just an incredible burden. And Apple has always been relentless. Like floppy disk, you don't need that. Optical disk, you don't need that. Rosetta, buy. 32-bit, buy. PowerPC, buy. And they just keep doing that over and over again. And it's what lets them stay, I think, agile enough to race towards the future, is continuously shedding things that people aren't using, or at least not significant portions of people are using out the back.
That makes sense. I mean, it does. I agree with you, Georgia. I think in terms of giving people a clear and easy option for how to go forward if it's something that they've always used. But I wonder if the people who use this will make a big stink about it, or are the people who already know sort of what the alternatives would be? Because in my opinion, and it may not be the case, but I always thought that Back to My Mac was kind of an advanced user feature. And so I felt like it could have been, it's one of those things where they may have already moved on to bigger and better software that does sort of remote access better than what's going on now. But regardless of that, I do think that you make a good point that, hey, if you're going to get rid of something, let's talk about what we need to do to replace it. And since that support document is there, that's great. But you can also check out our guide on iMore to see what you can use instead. All right, folks, we have reached the end of another episode of the iMore Show. I want to thank all of you out there for listening. And George Dow, let's go with you first. If people are looking to get in touch with you, how may they do so? How might they do so?
Well, if you're dealing with anxiety or depression, you can check out anxiety-videos.com. And I am occasionally on Twitter. It's at Georgia_Dow. Tim and I rocking the underscore.
Awesome. And Renee Ritchie, if people are looking for you online, where can they find you?
You can find everything aggregated. I'm not cool enough to rock a chihuahua.coffee like Micah, but I have imore.com/vector. And currently I'm doing Vector Daily, basically, which is a video that is also a podcast that is also a column. And I try to get it up every day. It's usually around 4 times a week. So you can find like the privacy one. You can watch the video, you can read the column, or you can listen to the podcast, whatever works best for you. And if you want them independently, you can just go to applepodcast.com/vector or youtube.com/vector show.
And you have these cool shirts, Renee. When are they going on sale? Can people buy them already?
Yes,
they're really comfy.
Standard.tv/vector. You can get the t-shirt, you can get the pins, and you can get the stickers.
The shirts are really soft, the soft cotton that I love. They're stretchy.
Wish I knew.
I have the prototype.
Yeah, the prototype came in small.
I didn't steal it. I didn't steal it, though. I see Michael looking at me like I stole this. I didn't steal it.
I'm just saying that's Georgia Dow's MO, is stealing things from Renee.
That is true. Renee has to glue things down, because if not...
you just steal the glue.
It's true, I did. It's true. Yeah.
No, thank you. I love the way they turned out.
Standard.tv/vector.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. If you are looking, Lori Gill. I'm sorry.
Lori Gill. Forget Lori.
Yes. If people are looking for you online, where can they find you?
They can find me at Appaholic on Twitter. That's APPAHOLIK. And at Lori Gill at most other social things, and at iMore, where I will be writing all about Apple products and things and such. And I don't have a cool aggregate, and I don't have a cool t-shirt. And
let me just say, Serenity Caldwell, we love her dearly. She is off at Apple, and Lori is doing amazing.
Yes,
on iMore. I dare say, it has seldom been in the steadier hands than Lori's. And
the mother of dragons.
Serenity, though.
Yeah. No, totally, absolutely miss Serenity, but man, would it have been a disaster without Lori.
Amen.
She's doing so well.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. Oh. I'm going to go cry now.
Well, while Lori goes off and cries, if you're looking for me online, I don't know why I went with that. That was a weird.
Heartless. That was heartless.
Yeah, that
Sorry,
felt
that was
Lori.
cold-blooded.
We love you, Lori. I'm sorry. I don't know what. How do you segue?
Segue no matter what. No matter what, that segue was going to happen.
It had to. There has to be a segue, I guess. And now that we've had all that awkward stuff, there's my segue. If you're looking for me online, you can find me at Micah Sargent on most things, including now that Mastodon site that's popping up. Or you can go to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUA.coffee to find links to all the things I do. You can find us all over at iMore and out in the world, kicking butt and taking names, because we are great. I don't know. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope that you have a fantastic week or weekend, depending on when you're listening. Thanks so much to Jim Metzendorf for editing the show and making us sound beautiful. This has been the iMore Show.
Bye.
Bum, bum.